This is Viva Fry.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is JP Sears.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Tammy Peterson.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
Hey, this is Brett Kissel, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast. How's everybody doing today? Happy Monday. In case you missed it, I put out a video that I'm pretty proud of on Friday. And yeah, we released it first on Substack and got lots of, great feedback. Some pretty heartfelt replies, if I'm being honest. And just want to say thank you to all the listeners who've been along for the ride. It's a video working on getting to 1,000, which I did not see coming anytime soon. And I don't know why I'm tongue-tied right now. It was just Jericho, wherever you're listening. He's the guy who does all the video for the Cornerstone Forum, and he's a young guy. And I tell you what, he just captured what I wanted to try and get out to people. So if you missed that, that's out on all the social media feeds, on Twitter or X and Facebook and everything. Anyways, you can go find it. Anyways, I just wanted to shine a light on that here on a Monday. And, all the craziness in the world, there's been a lot of you lovely people, including guests and sponsors and everything, just come into my life, and I assume others as well. And that community has been something of a shock to me on this side. And, we got to experience it at the MASH Spiel. And if you're coming to the Cornerstone Forum, you already know about it. If you've never been, I would highly recommend you do come to it, because those people show up in droves. And yeah, really excited to see all of you again. And I don't know, just a huge thank you to you all. I don't know how to spit it out. No, I don't have 1,000th guest right now. I'm working tirelessly on this side to try and track somebody down. And, if 1,000 comes and goes and it's, just me and Bob from down the street, I keep joking. I'm like, I'm going to be just fine. I'm not too worried about it. But I don't know. I'd like to have somebody for 1,000. Episode 100 was a big deal. And then episode 1,000 seems like, it's kind of a cool accomplishment. So I don't know. We'll wait and see what the next couple weeks bring. But, we are closing in. Today, 9:89. Holy Mackinac. Where does the time go? I don't know. And there's been a whole bunch of companies that have been here along the way. And why don't we get to some of those? Silver Gold Bull, of course, they're, along with Bow Valley Credit Union, bringing the Cornerstone Forum to Calgary once again. And the deadline for RRSPs is March 2nd. And did you know that you can hold physical gold and silver in your registered accounts? Yes, and they can help you do this. Silver Gold Bull, they got all their in-house solutions, whether buying, selling, storing precious metals. Of course, they can help you move your RRSPs into that as well. So if you're interested in that, text or email Graham down in the show notes for any questions you have around investing in precious metals or for future silver deals exclusively for you, the SMP listener. Bow Valley Credit Union, they've got a new spot opened up just recently in Red Deer. Yeah, Red Deer. It's all about lending, deposits, real financial advice. You can open accounts, talk through lending options, and get help with banking, all in a space designed for conversations, not transactions. That's their new space in Red Deer, a lending and advice center. So all you Red Deer listeners, maybe take a little peek. You got a new spot opened up. And if you want smarter banking with gold, silver, Bitcoin, sound money, and personal freedom, that's BVCU. You can find everything at BowValleyCreditUnion.com, BowValleyCU.com. Holy Mac. I'm all messed up. I shouldn't have talked about the video. I don't know why I get emotional on this side. Jericho did a really good job. Jericho, you did a fantastic job. And I'm very proud of that video. So, yeah, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. But it's got me all wound up on this side, I guess, this morning. Happy Monday. Profit River, when it comes to firearms. Yes, and all the craziness the Liberal government is doing. What you want to do is you want to reach out to somebody that knows what they're doing, and that is Profit River when it comes to firearms. Joel is the primary contact for all of you lovely folks. You can get a hold of him at snp@profitriver.com. You can also give him a phone call. You can stop in store. You can also go online. That's right. Go to profitriver.com. Make sure to use the coupon code SNP. It gets you put in for monthly draws. Of course, they are the major retailer of firearms, optics, and accessories, serving all of Canada. Carly Clausen, the team over at Windsor Plywood, builders of the podcast studio table. In the new studio, it's all Windsor Plywood wood. So when it comes to character wood, I want the best. They got the best. Mantles, decks, windows, doors, sheds, all of it. You know, when a trampoline goes flying into the neighbor's house, well, neighbor's backyard. That was us last week in that crazy wind. You know, and you got to replace some wood. You head to Windsor Plywood. And if you stop in there today here in Lloydminster, tell them I sent you. I'm going to come all the way back to the Cornerstone Forum, March 28th at the Westin Calgary Airport. If you haven't got your tickets, the countdown is now on to sell this sucker out. So, yeah, I don't know what you're waiting for, but I hope you don't wait much longer. We got an excellent lineup. Yes, the Premier is going to be speaking. Yes, Martin Armstrong is coming back. Yes, Neil Oliver is going to be there. Sam Cooper's coming into town. Chad Prather, Matt Ehret, Vince Lanchi, Alex Craner, Tom Luongo, Larry C. Johnson. Yeah, and I butchered this again, didn't I? Karen Kwiatkowski. I don't know. Sorry, Karen. Sorry, everyone who's like laughing at me as I butcher her name. Regardless, the Cornerstone Forum is going to be awesome, March 28th. If you're listening on all the platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, Substack, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. If you enjoy the show, give it a share. And I look forward to hearing all the 1,000 suggestions. Just know I've been working my butt off to try and pull something off. And I'm going to continue to do that. We didn't get here by giving up, did we? So let's have a little bit of fun, shall we? Give me that positive attitude out there, folks. Let's get somebody. All right, let's get on to that tale of the tape. Today's guest is a Canadian journalist, lecturer, historian, author, and founder of the Canadian Patriot Review. I'm talking about Matt Ehret. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Matt Ehret. Matt, how are you doing, sir? Happy New Year.
I'm doing okay. Good man. How are you doing? Happy New Year to you, too.
Well, I mean, we are, I don't know when this airs, folks, how many days that puts on left until the Cornerstone Forum. I think we're 60 plus days away from the Cornerstone Forum returning. To me, that's, I don't know where the time went. Like, I just, it feels like yesterday you were just here, along with everybody else, that's coming. And all of a sudden I blink and like we're 60 days away, and I'm like, oh man, I got so much to do to make sure this happens all over again. And I don't know. So I guess I'm doing good. I just things are picking up.
When I was watching you in action during the first Cornerstone that I was at last year, I was bewildered by the amount of moving parts that you had to keep in your mind to make the whole thing work smoothly. I've never had to deal with that level of organization of an event, so I'm always bewildered and in awe. And I heard that this one is looking like it's going to be yet bigger than last year's Cornerstone. Is that possible?
Bigger. When you say bigger, what do you mean?
More people. Yeah, more people.
Well, so yeah, it looks like there's going to be more people. I should say, if you haven't bought your ticket yet,
buy your ticket.
Because we actually have last year in the arena. My brain, I'm like, you could have like 1,800 people in there, right? You could have them sitting in the stands. At the Westin, that is not the case. We are a fixed room size, and so now the countdown is on to try and sell it out. And once it's sold out, there won't be more tickets coming out, right? So bigger in the sense, we could fit, compared to last year, we can fit 700 people this year. Last year, we had 658 in attendance. So you can do the math. I don't know. I can just look at it and I go, are we going to hit 658 again? Was last year a success? Wasn't a success? I think it was a success, which means, are we going to see a lower number? Well, the first Cornerstone, we had 250. Last year, we had 650, 658. And you go, I don't know. We're close. Now the countdown, I had a countdown of like I had my targets, and now it's reverted to countdown to sell out. So there's still tickets available. So bigger in that sense, yeah, slightly bigger. It's just a different venue, so it's going to be a packed venue. I think bigger in the sense that Premier Smith is coming. I know there's been some feedback of having a politician there, and I'm like, I don't know. She's the most conservative premier / leader we have in Canada. And I always like hearing from the horse's mouth. Like, what do you see the vision of Alberta in the next, and Canada in the next year, the next 5 years? You know, like where are you trying to lead a province to? I think that'll be very interesting to hear. And she is on stage for roughly 45 minutes, right? It isn't just like a, hey, thanks for coming out. Like there's actually a keynote followed by a one-on-one, or at least that's what's planned. I mean, obviously things can happen with the premier's schedule, but that's what's going on. And then a couple other, like one of the things I'm very interested in, I wanted it last year and it fell through, is you and Sam Cooper on stage against, not against each other. I guess it's kind of against each other. I want to see this China thing play out.
Yeah.
Because I have multiple sides that come on the podcast, and I've been trying to put this together for going on 2 years now. And this one, that's actually going to happen. So from a bigger sense, people-wise, yes. From an idea standpoint on stage, I think it's going to be different than what's happened previously.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like I think people really do appreciate seeing ideas that are divergent clash, and just to see where does, how does reason unfold in a debate. It's something that is, I think, we lack in our society. There's a lot of what do you call it, the singing to the choir, a lot of
sticking in an echo chamber.
Yeah. The little clicky thing ends up forming, just like it was in our high school cafeterias. It's like that in life as we mature too, and we end up just hanging around with people who already kind of think like us, and we just reinforce our prejudices and biases without actually testing out whether these things are true by going into that other clique and just seeing, well, hey, we're looking at a common reality, but we have very different interpretations. How do we know? Let's find out. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Bit nervous as well. I mean, I'm a little unpracticed at live debates, so this is going to be a first time in many years that I actually got a chance to try that part of my brain out. So it's gonna be
well.
fun.
If it makes you feel better, I'm a little nervous because I've never hosted anything resembling a debate. It's always a round table, and certainly I think of this debate more of a structured round table. Yeah. But regardless, I mean, at the end of the day, I try and, I don't know about you, but on this side, anytime I get where I feel like I'm comfortable, where I could literally do the same thing over and have just as much success, I'm like, I got to really throw a wrench into it and just see if we can't, have a little bit of fun. And I mean, I got to give a shout out to Silver Gold Bull and Bull Valley Credit Union, because Brett and Nick specifically, they're pushing on me all the time. What are you doing this year? You should try this. You should try that. And I'm like, right. So it helps to have people alongside you that want to push the envelope as well and give something a little different. Regardless, yes, I think this year's Cornerstone is going to be something worth attending. And
that's a safe way of saying it. That's
yeah.
No matter what, how you feel, it's going to be good. It'll be worth.
I think there's going to be some help. As much as I'm excited for that, I'm like extremely excited for. I got two names for it, like the Positive Roundtable or Charting a Path Forward in a Troubled World Roundtable with Neil Oliver, Karen Katowski, and Chad Prather. I look at that and I'm like, there's just something about having a discussion about where you're trying to get to, and then trying to like understand that and build out for an audience, or maybe the audience is impacting the discussion in shapes and forms I can't quite understand just yet. But like, what world do we want? And how are we going to get there if we don't have discussion and debate and thoughts being tested and talked about? And Neil Oliver, Chad Prather, Karen Katowski have had their different ways of saying things to me that I'm like, that is interesting. I'm curious what happens if we put this band together. Is there going to be a little bit of magic there? I hope there is. And I was going to have somebody table the round table, and I finally went, I want to table this round table. I'm excited about this round table. So I'm going to be the guy leading the charge on that one. So we'll see how it goes, man. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
yeah.
If there's a change in me from the lead up to last year's forum, I was like beyond. I don't know. Do we even want to do this? I remember having Drew Weatherhead sit across from me, and he had to like pep talk me. He's like, "You love this." I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just beside myself. There's just so much going on." Now I'm like, I'm in the chaos. I kind of understand the chaos. I'm excited for the chaos, and excited for the community that's going to show up to watch this too. There's some fantastic people that show up in Calgary.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean that enlivens me. Of all the places, I'm in Montreal on the East Coast, as you know, so I'm drowning. Sometimes it feels like there's a lack of patriotic oxygen, and it always enlivens me to take my little forays into Alberta and interact with the Patriot community there, because it's really a different culture. It's a different mindset entirely. So even though, like, I could say that there's a lot of you're always going to get, all kinds of misinformation and hotheads and things, but you've got moral patriotism that I can recognize that as fundamentally human and work with that. If you don't have that, doesn't matter how intelligent somebody is, how smart they is, but if they don't have that in their heart, there's not much to work with. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, speaking of patriotism and some things along that lines, the big news, I was just telling you before we started, I sat down last night, the Shaun of 20s probably can't envision Shaun sitting down and watching Donald Trump for an hour and a half, his speech and then his Q&A at the World Economic Forum. It's almost surreal, even going back 5 years, where the World Economic Forum was some sort of conspiracy. That doesn't happen. They aren't doing those. That isn't actually. And then you have Donald Trump there this year. I mean, you've got Mark Carney. I watched his full speech there. I mean, there's a ton of world leaders there. And of course, in Donald Trump's, he spends, I don't know, is it 20 minutes? It's a good chunk of time on Greenland.
Yep.
Matt, your thoughts on Greenland?
Yeah, it's I'm chewing on it too. I liked how he introduced it. I found it a very entertaining and enjoyable speech overall. I gotta admit, the bashing of the windmill stuff, that's always a pleasure to see him polemicize against these things that are bird killers. They destroy agriculture, but they're really great otherwise. Like I love these little sardonic little swipes.
I also like how he pointed out, China's building them all, but what are they using?
Yeah, they're not stupid enough to use it. They're looking at us like we're idiots. Like, what are we doing?
You want these? We'll build them for you. You have as many as you want. We're going to take everything else, though.
No, yeah, there's definitely an enjoyable wit and humor that I appreciate. And then when he shifted gears, and I don't think he was actually truthful when he said that I wasn't going to talk about Greenland, but he talked about Greenland, and he launched right into it. And you can only imagine, the reps from Denmark and Copenhagen and the EU squirming in their chairs uncomfortably. And I gotta say, I'm unsettled in my absolute conviction on what is the strategy. It does seem, where I perhaps thought a year ago, even a few months ago, that this might be a bit of a rhetorical flourish. I've increasingly come to see this as a very clear ambition that is unstoppable. That if Trump really does want it, and now I'm quite convinced how seriously he is when he says he wants it, I'm completely persuaded he's going to get it, because there's nothing to stop him. There's absolutely nothing that the EU has, that Denmark has. There's 56,000 people, highly resentful people in Greenland who don't like Denmark. They don't necessarily want to be absorbed by the U.S., whether by purchase or by military invasion. They don't want that either, but they don't like Denmark, and for good reason. It's kind of like, you look at why would somebody want Denmark? Well, why would they want Greenland? Well, Greenland's friggin' huge. It's strategically located in the Arctic. It's the U.S. It's the place where the U.S. has their closest military base to the North Pole, which is highly strategic. I think the 21st century and beyond is going to be really shaped by a battle over the Arctic, and the resources are abundant, under mapped out. Something like only 1/5 of Denmark's surface area is not covered in massive amounts of ice. So highly
once again 1/5 of Greenland's. You said Denmark. You mean Greenland, correct?
Yeah, I keep on Screw
Yes,
that up.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, 1/5 of Denmark is not under ice, so highly under prospected. But we know that there's an immense amount of natural gas. The U.S. Geological Survey has presumed that something like 3 of the largest natural gas reserves in the world are under Denmark's ice. Might be even more than that. But rare earths galore, iron. Not sure about uranium, but so you got a lot of resources. You got a population which has been highly abused. Very similar to the Canadian Inuit population as far as the abuses, the suicide rates, the alcoholism, the domestic abuse, and for similar reasons too. Like they suffered eugenics in the 1960s and 70s. There's big scandals. People wonder why the green mark birth rates collapsed so drastically in the 70s, and it's because it was revealed, just like in Canada, that there was a top-down program to sterilize women. Half of the fertile population was sterilized in Greenland in the 1960s and 70s by a eugenics policy. Again, a similar thing happened in Canada as well during that same period in the Cold War in the 60s and 70s, where thousands of women, of mostly First Nations and Inuit women, were sterilized, given things up there. And they didn't know. They did not consent. Some were as young as the age of 12. There's a lot of resentment. Every time that the Greenland people have wanted a pipeline or wanted to have a bit of economic development, they've been blocked over the past 50 years by Copenhagen, which has instead kept them as a welfare state, surviving off of handouts and not permitted to actually have a real economy. And that's largely why there's a big separatist movement in Greenland. I think it's getting more and more popular as the idea that, hey, if the U.S. comes in, they're offering to either give us all $100,000 and open up real resource development. That's attractive to a lot of people who have had no hope for generations. So there's clearly good reasons why anybody would want it, why the U.S. would want it. There's many reasons why the Greenland people would benefit from also that agreement. Do I think it's ultimately truly a net positive for humanity? I'm on the fence, and I could show you. We could talk about that a little bit, maybe with a couple of images if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay. So I guess the first thing that I'll do, I'll throw 2 scenarios: the good one and the bad. No, I'll start with the negative scenario first, and then we can go with the good one. Okay. So the negative one is there's a recent ambassador who's been named by the United States to be the ambassador to Denmark. And that person's name is Ken Howery. Ken Howery is one of the best friends of Elon Musk. He's one of the co-founders of PayPal. He's one of these Silicon Valley billionaires, transhumanist, who believes that it's our destiny to merge with machines in order to stay relevant under, some new phase of evolution. So he's part of that Silicon Valley transhumanist religion that, for me, I've been mapping its evolution in my book series and in my research over the past couple of years. When I see those people get influence, I find it difficult to invoke joy when apparently good things are happening. So the fact that guy of all people would be the one selected to be the head of Denmark, who's also he's a proponent of Peter Thiel's praxis, the freedom cities, kind of like these right-wing or these conservative branded 15-minute cities. So you got the 15-minute cities from the WEF that's been marketed for the left, who want some Orwellian parent state to monitor them to keep people safe and healthy and vaccinated. So you've got those things, and then you have a different version of it spun for a libertarian audience, which basically models itself around the idea of localized little Bitcoin freedom cities, micromanaged outside with their own jurisdictions and their own legal codes around a billionaire class that will own the majority of the assets, and that people can participate in having little micro communities. But ultimately, it kind of, in my mind, plays into the possibility of some sort of a techno-feudal operation. And I think Peter Thiel has been very clear. His guru, Curtis Yarvin, also has been very clear on the idea of techno-feudalism under a global monarchy or some techno-monarchy as being the ideal form of social organization. And all of these Silicon Valley creeps tend to all think the same way. So again, that's Ken Howery. People can Google him, new ambassador to Denmark, best friends of Elon Musk. And then And I'm gonna not end on a black pill, okay? I'm gonna end on a good pill, on a more hopeful tone. But I do want people to just appreciate the terrain a little bit. So maybe you could just show a screen share from my recent article published on my Substack. And as you can see, I chose to call this. I published this earlier this week to entertain these two scenarios: taking Greenland to 21st century war plan red, or a leap to the North American Technate. People might be asking, what is this North American Technate? So that's how I end it, is just this word of caution. It's basically that. I'm sure a lot of your audience members have probably seen this. You've seen this, right, Shaun?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So, yeah, I would imagine at this point, unless you've been living really under a rock, you've probably encountered this image, which looks like it's out of some wild, crazy conspiracy theory. But what it features, for those who might just be listening right now and not watching, is a map from the 1930s of North America, featuring a jurisdiction called the Technate of the America. That features in red Greenland, all of Canada, the USA, and Mexico, all the way down to Central America and the Caribbean, Cuba, down to Venezuela, Nicaragua, and the northern part of Colombia, and I think Guyana. So that's one jurisdiction. The reason why it's concerning, and people should pay attention to this, and in my book on the Revenge of the Mystery Cults, Volume 2, I spent a few chapters going into the history of where did this map come from, and did it go away after World War II as an idea? The answer is no, it didn't. Is that this was run by or promoted by an organization that was quite surprisingly popular in Canada and in the USA, called Technocracy Incorporated. And it was set up by a fellow named Frank Scott, who was an American technocrat. A guy, actually, he wasn't even a real engineer. He called himself an engineer, but he wasn't. He flunked out of university, never actually worked in the field of engineering. I think he didn't really do much, but he all of a sudden found himself at the head because he was very charismatic, a big 6'6" guy, very, very intimidating, and had a bit of charisma, and was very confident about the type of world order that should be created out of the Great Depression, based upon an overthrow of the elected class as an obsolete and outdated thing, and the overthrow of corrupt capitalism in order to create a new type of society organized by the engineers. And the idea was that the world would be organized by these jurisdictional technates, where an unelected technocracy of engineers would control the levers of production, would grant basically universal basic income. So a limited amount of social credits for every person to use as they see fit, to buy their groceries or what have you. And that would be tied to how much they would be expected to consume and produce in the course of their lifetime. So it was a very mathematized way of trying to organize society. This grouping, actually, one of its leaders gave rise to this garbage Rockefeller-funded theory called peak oil, that presumed that oil was made from animals over millions of years, and there's only a limited amount that we are going to reach the peak of. And so this is guy, something King Hubbard, was the founder of peak oil theory, who was a leader of the Technocracy crowd and one of the co-authors of this. Now, the other thing is that the Canadian branch of Technocracy Inc. was run by a fellow by the name of Joshua Haldeman. And that name might not strike a lot of listeners as relevant. But Joshua Haldeman, who ran this thing and actually got arrested by the Mackenzie King government in 1940, when Canada got into World War II, he was found to be a little bit too fascist and on the wrong side of that war. So he got arrested and had to find a new job and run something a little bit different. But this guy, Joshua Haldeman, for the 3 years that he ran this, he became, let's say it this way, he became the grandfather of Elon Musk. So Joshua Haldeman was very closely aligned to an organization earlier from Saskatchewan called the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation of Saskatchewan. So before he ran Technocracy Inc., he ran this organization in Saskatchewan for 3 years, from 1933 to 1936. He was the founder and head of the Saskatchewan Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, where he set this up alongside 5 Rhodes Scholars from Oxford And what's disturbing is that it called itself the Fabian Society of Canada. So this was the outgrowth of an organization that was set up to basically do the same thing as Technocracy Inc. Use the Great Depression as an excuse to usher in a new age under a society run by an elite managerial class of specialists. And so he did that first. It wasn't getting the traction he wanted, so he set up Technocracy Inc. As you can see, again, Denmark is key in this whole thing. He says that it's pacifist, that they would be doing this with the idea of having a world of stability and peace. However, I don't think any of those countries of Latin America that are under this jurisdiction would necessarily just bow down in peace. It does require a certain military power to go and do this. And one of the other things about Technocracy Inc. is that to be a member required that you give up your name and replace your name with a series of numbers and X's. So 32X and pick a symbol and another number. And that was like everybody's code as members of this group. There was 500,000 members in California alone. It was quite popular. The fact that Elon Musk has himself used the language of technocracy Incorporated, talking about his idea for a Martian technocracy. He's even used that naming protocol on his child. Again, indicates to me that this did not necessarily go away, and it's not like it doesn't influence the thinking of Elon, who's the richest guy in the world, who's a transhumanist who believes we have to merge with machines. That sort of idea set is bad, and also the fact that he went to South Africa. That after he couldn't get power in Canada, he decided in 1949, just as apartheid is beginning in South Africa, largely due to many of the unreconstructed Nazis who were given safe haven in Latin America, but also South Africa. He thinks that that's the most freedom-loving place in the world, and that's where he goes and sets up his family, and that's where Elon Musk is born, and all of these things. And that's also where Peter Thiel also is born, to a very affluent family. So that's the negative side of what I'm thinking could be the not so good scenario possibly in play as it stands currently. Now, I mentioned that there might be some good scenarios. I think people need to hear some possible good scenarios at the same time to balance out, because we don't have all the information. We're not privy to everything. Yep.
Before we move on to positive thoughts.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Every time I talk to you, you say something like, I don't know if I knew that. And the last time we talked, we got into Alaska, and that the Russians sold it to the Americans. And I was like, what? Why don't I learn that in history? When it comes to apartheid, I'm just thinking here quickly, folks. I don't think I realized it started in 1948. In my brain, for some reason, apartheid began when the British went in. So before we move on, could you just walk me through the apartheid starting and why it started, or at least from your research, that portion of this? Like, why does he go from Saskatchewan to Africa?
Well, I think here part of it has to do with, I'm making a documentary and I'm writing a book. It should be ready. The book and the documentary, I'm planning on having them come out around the same time in about a month. That's my goal. The book is going to be called Why Real Patriots Don't Think Like Hitler. And the documentary is going to be called Beyond Europa. Beyond Europa, because that's a documentary series that went viral a couple of years ago. And there is I don't know if people have noticed this, but especially amongst the alternative media community, mostly conservative Christian-minded audiences, there's been a profiling and a massive explosion of narratives that are rehabilitating Hitler and Nazism as being the good guys of the story of World War II. And they use a lot of truth in their expositions, whether it's Nick Fuentes or Kanye West or the authors of Europa, that are very closely tied to a bunch of Ukrainian Nazis that Chrystia Freeland was sponsoring.
Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Keep moving. what they do is they introduce a lot of truth that makes it attractive about international conspiracies, Freemasons, things like that, Jewish bankers, which, you tend to walk into when you start scratching on the surface of past or present events as bad people. Some of them are often very powerful, have powerful Jewish family names. But then what they do is they spin things to make it seem as though, well, because the bad guys won, like, the winners write history, the bad guys are the winners, the bad guys won history, thus everything opposite of our official narratives that are told to us in history books must be the true. And so since we're told that the worst guy was Hitler, he must be the best guy. And then they recraft their story to, as people listening to Nick Fuentes or whatever, Kanye West messaging would have noticed, that becomes all of a sudden the good guy, the good nationalist German who just wanted peace and, liberty and like make Germany great again or something, was like, that's all he wanted. And then they demonized him. No, he was actually very much, the entire growth of fascism and especially Nazism was tied to satanic, black magician, pagan secret societies such as the Thule Society, which, by the way, was a strange name given to the U.S. military base that became the Space Force base in Greenland, the Thule Air Base, before it changed its name in 2020. The Vril Society was an aspect of the Thule Society. You had the New Templar Order of Heinrich Himmler, where they were bringing in Tibetan Bon. It's called the Bon religion of Tibet, which is basically black magic, esoteric Buddhism, try to open portals to demons and shit. It involves a lot of very nasty things that they were reviving at their inner core as a religion to rewrite Christianity, to introduce pagan tropes into Christianity. Literally, the whole Bible was rewritten under the Reichsbible. That's going to all be in my documentary in my book. Literally, like, thou shalt not kill was erased and replaced with thou shalt honor thy Führer and keep thy blood pure, were two other commandments introduced into the Reichsbible. There was an Aryan warrior, Jesus, who was the son of, or the prodigy, or or progeny is the word, of like Mary's tryst with a Roman Teutonic soldier. So he literally, like, people who think that Hitler was this good Christian, they're out to lunch. They don't realize, they just got to look at like what was the mandatory Bible, what was the resetting of religions, what was this black magician class around Heinrich Himmler. Because it's a totally different story but if we appreciated that, we would then have a better appreciation for what the hell happened after World War II and what has shaped, what have we allowed into our society to shape the levers of our culture, of our military, of our intelligence agencies, of our entertainment as well, right? Our Hollywood CIA-funded movies and films that shape our collective dream, our collective imagination of the future and humanity. We let a lot of toxic crap into our society because most of those, like, Satanists who were behind the growth of fascism were never punished at all. They continued to go to work and enjoy vast privileges and controls influencing our society. One of those things, so I mentioned that Elon Musk's grandfather did Fabian Society of Canada, then he did Technocracy Incorporated, then for 3 years, from 1942 to actually longer than that, 1942 to 1949, he was the president of the Saskatchewan Social Credit Party, where a big mandate, and I'm a fan of the way social credit was applied in many ways in Alberta and in British Columbia under W.A.C. Bennett. I'm big fans of those guys, okay? Because I don't think they were fully following the fundamentals of what Major Douglas was actually saying and doing with his theosophical New Age clique. So one
I'm going to pause you all over again because you're rattling on.
Okay,
you do this to me every time.
Okay, I will do this though. I ask your question, but then I will bring it back to South Africa. I promise.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So, the grandfather of Elon Musk, was the president of the Social Credit Party in Saskatchewan. Is that what you said?
Yes.
I find that really interesting. Now, I don't mean to say that just because, forgive me, the reason why the Social Credit Party registers in my brain is in the middle of COVID, there was new parties forming to try and push against the established ones. And I kept asking people, political nerds specifically, when was the last time an upstart party won its first election and actually took over government? and nobody could give me an answer. And then I stumbled into it, and it was William Aberhart in Alberta, and he led the Social Credit Party. So I'm like, but they called him Bible Bill. Like, I mean, he was, I mean, once again, I haven't done this huge deep dive on the guy, but from what I've learned of it, he was, I can't see them two mixing. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, I guess is what I'm trying to point out.
Well, I think I've done a little bit of work on Aberhart, and I generally like him. Also W.A.C. Bennett, I'm a much bigger fan. I really like W.A.C. Bennett of British Columbia, who was the head of the Social Credit Party there for 20 years. I really respect what he did. However, I think a lot of these two guys, their successes largely happened to the degree that they deviated from some of the core fundamentals embedded within Major Douglas's, who's a British military intelligence figure, very much tied to Aleister Crowley and the New Age Blavatsky sects that had organized things like, for example, social credit as a name was coined not by Douglas himself, but rather by A.R. Orage, who was a Crowleyite. He published New Age magazine. That was literally what it was called in World War I and a little bit afterwards. He's the one who coined the term social credit and helped Douglas craft his theory of society, which, again, he published Douglas's works. I think he was also the assistant of Gurdjieff, who is an occult black magician working in intelligence networks as well, very influential in today's New Age movement. Again, Aleister Crowley was a major British intelligence operative and occultist, carrying out, human sacrifice. People could read some of his works on how to pick the perfect child sacrifice to do one of your workings. He did a variety of workings to try to usher in the Antichrist and called himself the Beast 666. But he was also working in America, also in Canada, at organizing networks of occult intelligence operatives during World War I, even before that and after, all the way up until World War II. And they were promoting things like the Protocols of Zion, the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which is basically a theosophical forgery set up by Freemasons in Russia in order to reinstate the pogroms, to basically convince the elites of Russia that they have to destroy the Jews in order to save themselves from this vast conspiracy. Now, it's true, there was a vast conspiracy to destroy the Romanovs. That's true. But the protocols were created largely by those very same conspirators in order to deflect attention away from who was really behind the effort to basically kill the Romanovs and do the Bolshevik Revolution, which had a lot more to do with those very same people who were funding fascism. Those same Wall Street and London bankers who were pouring cash into the growth of Bolshevism on the one hand and of fascism, like Prescott Bush and the whole J.P. Morgan clan that was, building up, and the Rockefellers who were building up eugenics. They were building up eugenics as a science, a racial science of purifying humanity of the unfit, the useless eaters, and creating a society of positive eugenics that would help to breed the more fit. So that was all going on by the same people playing both sides. Radical, they were funding radical left Bolshevism. They were funding the radical right conservative reaction to that in a controlled dialectic. That's the way the game is always played. False left extreme, false right extreme, wait for the chaos, and then control the synthesis. That's always the formula. It's always been the formula since ancient Rome. It's not a new thing. So if you look at who was publishing in Canada the Protocols of Zion, it was the Social Credit Party of Quebec, of Saskatchewan. They were the ones who were bankrolling and funding the dissemination of this across the Canadian population. And in the U.S., you had associates of this grouping around Henry Ford, around George Sylvester Virake, who was a disciple of Crowley, who was also Hitler's main ambassador to the United States as an agent of the Nazis, who was also disseminating that across the U.S. This comes up in my book quite a bit. This all plays into the milieu in which Elon Musk's grandfather is operating. When Elon Musk's grandfather goes to South Africa, he continues to write and publish, and you can find his writings, his pamphlets, his little booklets, even now scanned. They're online. Some of them are available. I read them, and they read like an Alex Jones, John Birch Society conspiracy. Again, 1950s, 1960s. He's writing, exposing the Jew bankers, declaring the glories of the freedom of South Africa as the only freedom-loving state willing to stand up to the impure classes who are trying to invade genetically the pure white culture of Rhodesia. He's still using that terminology, Rhodesia, as based on the Cecil Rhodes, kingdom that was set up in the late 19th century, and I think did bring in a lot of the structures of the 1948 apartheid were made possible by what was infused into South Africa because of Cecil Rhodes and his organization of a highly white racial superior. It was a highly racist civil service. This is what brought in the Rhodes Milner Roundtable Group to manage the Boer War, to basically promote radical eugenics and racism. And Hitler made those things sound very bad for most people when they saw the actual political consequences of what eugenics is, what these things are when you allow them to just grow to their logical extreme. People got horrified when that, after World War II, it became politically toxic to talk about eugenics. Although we did it, as I mentioned earlier, in Greenland and in Canada, we still kept doing it to the natives. We just didn't tell them. And it was only made, public in like 2020 that these things were happening. So we were still doing it. But it was no longer something you could say publicly. So this is where Elon Musk's grandfather decides to go to South Africa. And I think the way it's organized too is South Africa is the template for the type of Orwellian global world order that they want to build. Because the way South Africa under apartheid was set up was under districts. And unless you had clearance, everyone had an identity card that had both your genetic makeup. So if you were, there was something like 13 different categories of human, which had different rights to each category. So if you were pure white and could prove it, you had maximum freedom of mobility. If you were black, or if you were mulatto, or some mixture of mulatto, then you would have different privileges of mobility, of what kinds of jobs you could get, what kinds of water fountains you could go to, what kinds of restaurants you could go to. Were you allowed to leave your district or not? And there were cases of mass purges of districts. Like at one point, they wanted to take an all-black district, I think it was District 19 or something, and they wanted to turn it into a luxury district, and that meant everybody had to leave. And they basically soldiers were brought there in the 1970s. I have this again in my chapter. I haven't looked at this in about a year, so here I can pull up the information here, I suppose. Here, let me get it right now. It was, so yeah, you had the 1950, under this 1950 Suppression of Communism Act, right? They were radically anti-communist. That was their excuse of pushing these fascist policies in South Africa. It was District 6 in Cape Town. It was determined that this black-dominated District 6 was going to become a whites-only area, even though whites only made up 1% of the population when the law was passed. This is the Group Areas Act. Everybody had to leave, and all of the buildings were demolished, and a new upper class of a segregated community was built up literally from scratch. And people who tried to resist got arrested, or in a few cases gunned down. You had the 1951 Bantu Authorities Act forced blacks to request permission and special passes to be granted the right to leave their district for any reason. That was 1951. And again, the Haldemods lived in the richest neighborhood in Pretoria. And you had thousands and thousands of people in Pretoria protesting in the 1960s and 70s. And in one case, 20,000 civilians, mostly school children, were brought in to protest this Orwellian system. And it was called the Soweto Uprising. And soldiers carried out a mass shooting on the kids, killing about 700 children. This is 1976, and there's terrible pictures that people could watch online. It looks like the Gaza, frankly. So that's what they've wanted, I think, to use as a model for the type of world order on a more broad scale at some point in the future, which would be a society where everybody has their social credit programs. They have a limited amount of credits that's tied to their behavior, which again was what Technocracy Inc. wanted, was to measure everybody's behavior. They just didn't have the computing power in the 1930s to practically make it possible, but that's what they explicitly want in their they had a Bible. It was called the Technocracy Inc. Study Guide that people could still read. And it calls for building up systems that can monitor everybody's every action. And they even speculate that it would be possible to measure brain neural pathways in order to predictively arrest people if needed, who are going to do, let's say, a thought crime. So that's one of the ideals within their 1930s, 40s study guides. And that's what they were actually trying to apply in I think, a more isolated laboratory case of South Africa, and that they've wanted to bring about on a more, they've always wanted to scale that up. So that's another aspect of, I think, why and when he was in South Africa, like I said, he was promoting all of the same Hitlerian tropes. To what degree that influenced Elon, a young Elon, I have no idea. No clue. You okay?
I'm trying to keep up. Honestly, Matt, every time you come on, I'm like, okay. I'm just trying to keep up, right? I don't know.
It's well, okay. So I know that this is kind of heavy stuff. Like it's.
We started on Greenland. We got into this, and I'm like, part of my brain goes, how on earth do they do that? And then I just rewind to COVID times. Like, well, no, I see how they push fear and compliance follows through that. And then I'm doing mental math in my head of like, so in 48, they introduce apartheid, and it takes 42 years, a lifetime, to get apartheid removed. And then obviously there's second, third, fourth order effects to all these things going on just there, not to mention elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I come back to Greenland, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to circle all the way back to Greenland,
mm-hmm.
right? We're talking about some dark stuff and how all the pieces are kind of tied together and all these networks are formed. Give me your positive outlook then.
Yeah, okay, all right, let's do the positive thing. So the positive thing would play on a little bit of what Alex Craner, who I think is among the best analysts as far as finding a positive spin on objectively true details of the world messed up situation that we find ourselves, So let's say I'm using Alex Craner, who's a good friend of mine, and I think he's going to be right. He's going to be at the next Cornerstone too, right?
Yes, he is. I was just chatting with him this morning. Yeah.
Oh, you were? Okay, cool. So,
sorry. And for folks not on the podcast, we were trying to nail down his flight because I've been on him. Anyways, the more details need to be shared. Just that's why we're chatting. We're working on getting his travel sorted out.
Okay. So let's say I'm looking at Alex's analysis. We'll talk a little bit about the positive side. So his and it's shared by Tom Luongo. It's shared by Susan Kakinda, my co-host on Badlands Media. It's a MAGA news channel. I do a show once a week there. Gordon, he's quite smart, and he's always got a positive spin that he looks at. They all have sort of similar things. Maybe Gordon's a little bit more QAnon extreme. The other one's not so much, but they've got a positive and a rational way of kind of like reading the terrain, and I'll share some of that possibility. So Alex is of the view that there's been a backdoor agreement reached in secret between the Russian elite and Trump and Trump's inner circle, and that everything right now is being done as a bit of kayfabe, a little bit of smoke screen to confuse America and humanity's enemies by giving sort of contradictory, conflicting, chaotic messaging, but actually organizing a certain beat that's very rhythmed and very organized in a rational way, in a moral way, to pull the rug out from under the feet of the British Empire, the City of London, and their control mechanisms that have done so much damage in managing all of our deep states over many, 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 many decades, really since before the American Revolution, you could say. And so this is a big sort of coup d'etat, long plan that's being acted upon now with the collusion of the U.S., Russia, and possibly the leadership around Xi Jinping, who are all working together. I'd like to believe that that's true. Obviously, based on what people just heard me say, I don't fully believe it, but I'm open. I'm open. And so what I'll do is I'll share some of the positive stuff. So let's say I'm looking at Alex's analysis. His analysis is what I'll do Susan Kikinda actually just gave a recent presentation. If you could play my screen again from my article. Here's a map where I mentioned that my title of my article is A 21st Century War Plan Red, or a North American Technate. So the War Plan Red idea was a response to what people see on their screen right now, and that's a map from a book on exposing War Plan Red, which was the name given to 1930 U.S. military strategy. Actually, here, let me just pull it up. It's this one right here. So that's actually the picture of War Plan Red, which is a U.S. strategy that was created to prepare for an invasion, both of Canada, but more so even so that here, this is another part of it. So it was designed to prepare for the possible war with Great Britain and the USA in the 1930s. The idea was that if a war was declared, because Britain had a huge amount of their elites who were pro-Nazi. You know, the King of England was pro-Nazi. Many of the British elites were through the City of London and the Bank of International Settlements. Montague Norman, who was the head of the Bank of England, was a major sponsor and promoter of fascism and appeasement, and wanted to have a new world order, an Anglo-Nazi world order managed by this fascist class. And a lot of patriots in America were not happy with that, and so they prepared this program. Now, Canadians are often shown this with no context. I was shown this in school in order to convince me that this is why Americans always want to invade and control Canada, and why America is this evil empire, and that's all it is. There's never been anything good. The fact is, this was done as a response, this was not the first thing. This was done as a response to this, which is a 1919 Defense Scheme 1 created by the British military for their assets in Canada, which was then still a dominion. In many ways, it still is a dominion, to invade the USA with the help of Japan, that was a close special ally of Great Britain. So the U.S. didn't start this fight. The U.S. simply created a necessary response to preemptively stop that invasion from happening by taking control of British assets in Canada under such a circumstance, which was not just Canada. It was also, it would have involved dealing with the Latin American aspect of British and fascist influence. The Germans had a lot of influence. The fascist apparatus had a lot of influence in Mexico. And also, as you could see there on the left-hand side, was a preparation for a defense against the Japanese planned attacks that were designed by the British for the Japanese to carry out strikes first on Pearl Harbor and then brought a broader invasion into the West Coast. And that was called War Plan Orange by the U.S. military, was to deal with the Japanese aspect of it, and War Plan Red was the Canadian-British aspect of it. So that was, Susan Kikinda gave a presentation not that long ago, just last week, saying that this is what she believes is in play right now. We know that the Canadian military has put forth a scenario, a discussion paper to prepare for a possible scenario of a U.S. invasion and what to do. They pretty much, by the way, they pretty much say in their discussion paper that they have no military in Canada to do anything about it, but they say that we can learn from the Taliban. And that means what they describe as asymmetrical warfare will be the tactic that we can mobilize in the context of such an invasion by the United States. So it's kind of crazy. Now, what Britain put forth was later adopted by the Nazis, almost verbatim. And this was published in a 1942 March 2nd edition of Life magazine. These are just several of the images showcasing what the Japanese German invasion plans of North America would be. One of which would be, as you could see right here, the British Japanese response from 2 decades earlier was what the fascists took up in 1942. Also involves taking control of the Panama Canal as a strategic choke point. Another aspect was plan number 4 for an invasion of Latin America through Natal and then up through the USA via Mexico and the Caribbean, via New Orleans specifically. And the last one here is through Greenland, would be the Nazis effectively getting control of England. And again, like I said, there were many British aristocrats who were very much in favor of peace and an alliance with Nazi Germany. People like Sir Oswald Mosley and others. And once that was done, then to take Iceland, Greenland, and then move through Canada, because once Britain falls, the idea was then it would be very easy to get Canada, and then down through Canada into the USA to take control of the US. I think Philip K. Dick came up with, or took some of these scenarios and turned them into a bunch of books that were made into some entertaining alternative reality films. So we could stop the screen share here. Oh, actually, I'll just read a quote here before I say anything about this. In 1944, Franklin Roosevelt, who largely disrupted this New World Order agenda at the time by breaking the rules of the game and taking down the Wall Street banks, he sabotaged the London Conference for a central bankers' one world government, which was what was happening in 1933. He sabotaged all of these things. He's so underrated and written as a villain of history in a disgusting way that it makes me sad. But he said to his son, before he was poisoned and killed by Churchill, which he was, there was no autopsy, and Stalin even said to his son Elliot Roosevelt years later that your father was poisoned by Churchill's people, and that's published in his son. His son was his personal secretary, Franklin Roosevelt. And Roosevelt said to his son, and I'm just going to quote straight from his book as he saw it. You know, any number of times the men in the State Department have tried to conceal messages to me, delay them, hold them up somehow, just because some of those career diplomats over there are not in accord with what they know I think. They should be working for Winston Churchill. As a matter of fact, a lot of the time they are working for Churchill. Stop to think of them. Any number of them are convinced that the way for America to conduct its foreign policy is to find out what the British are doing and then copy that. I was told 6 years ago to clean out that State Department. It's like the British Foreign Office. And I thought that that's a very poignant thing because a year later he's dead. And a lot of the institutions that he had created to thwart fascism and to try to bring about a world of cooperating sovereign nation states that would internationalize the success of the New Deal, which was basically the American system of Lincoln that he revived to allow for state-directed credit, the power of the nation state to promote productive credit for the development of your manufacturing, your core infrastructure base, in a way that would allow for society to heal from the centuries of oligarchical manipulation and depopulation and subjugation. That was his vision, and he elaborates upon it quite brilliantly, and he had networks and allies all around the world who were ready to apply it, with his World Bank, his IMF, the GATT system. Unfortunately, all of these things were destroyed. They became infiltrated by these Rhodes Scholar, Fabian enemies of humanity that were promoting fascism earlier, that then took control of these in order to resubjugate the world under what became the Cold War. And ultimately, we saw the rise and influence of a lot of these Nazis and what have you. JFK did quite a valiant job in the short time he was around to push back against this. And, you know, he threatened to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the winds. He had a whole program to industrialize Africa and to work to end the Cold War, which he announced at the United Nations in 1963 in August, right 2 weeks before dying, that the U.S. would like to work with Russia to create a new space program to voyage and explore the universe together as a way to end the Cold War doctrine of this eternal war, this forever mutual assured destruction idea of that was controlling us. So he had to be eliminated. He also had a plan to end the Vietnam War. And what eliminated him was made possible by a lot of French, Italian fascists that were working then for Allen Dulles. Even after Dulles got fired as the CIA director, they were still working for him. They were working for NATO as part of the NATO secret army apparatus that I think many of your audience, I know you've got a very well-informed audience who's very aware that NATO had secret armies of unreconstructed Nazis that were operating in all parts of the world, including in Canada, including in the United States, carrying out targeted assassinations, running, you know, Marxist-Leninist terrorist cells like the Weather Underground or the Red Brigades in Italy and Germany or the FLQ in Quebec. Doing, you know, basically terrorizing the population in order to demand for increasingly captured governments to give them security and get rid of their freedoms, as we saw with the October crisis of martial law in Quebec, which was also partially made possible because people were so terrorized by these Nazi-run, cells of anarcho-terrorists saying, "Down with empire! Let's blow up citizens with mailbox bombs." Really, that's how you're going to fight empire? That people were so terrorized, and then certain leaders were kidnapped and killed, like Pierre Laporte, the Deputy Prime Minister of Quebec. Quebec was murdered in a ritualistic satanic killing. That people were inclined to say, well, maybe we do need the government to come in with tanks on the street and declare martial law to keep us all safe. That was always a controlled operation from the top. That was tied directly to Pierre Elliott Trudeau and the RCMP, and that's a whole discussion we can have. And I've written a book about that. So this is the whole thing that JFK was fighting against. We had different moments. Reagan, at his best moments before he was shot, was also trying to push back against this apparatus. I want to believe that Trump is an authentic patriot that was also fighting back and pushing against this thing and has done a better job at staying alive. That's the Tom Luongo Kokinda thesis. I want to believe that. And if that's true, and there's a reason to believe that that's true. Like Putin and Lavrov have both spoken positively about Trump's push to take control of Greenland. They're not against that, partially because it will also give them a much easier defense of their actions in Ukraine, which is legitimate, or it would also help China have its argument to say, well, that's why we need to get Taiwan. And look, you can't keep on virtue signaling us because you're doing it yourself in Venezuela and Greenland. It's making it a lot harder to maintain why all of a sudden securing your own backyard is all of a sudden such a bad thing. And also, Putin has also said positively that he is interested in and will be joining the Gaza Board of Peace as a way to sort of create a new international mechanism outside of the UN. I'm not necessarily against that if it's done for the right reasons and you don't have Tony Blair managing that shit show. Because if Tony Blair, who's also on the Gaza Board of Peace and the executive board, is behind it, then I don't trust it. If you allow him to have a say, at least. So we'll see. I don't know.
It's interesting because you point to, forgive me, Roosevelt, JFK, Lincoln, those three American leaders as pushing back against the established order, correct? So it is possible that in Donald Trump you have someone pushing back against the established order.
Yes, that's possible. It's possible. It's been done. I just, like I said, I would, for me to have more confidence, I just would like to have seen more evidence that all of these satanic, powerful agencies that have grown in influence and killed JFK and converted our military into a Michael Aquino managed, shit show of psychopaths running special forces operations to massacre whole countries and innocent people in Afghanistan and Iraq and all of this, and did in 9/11, which was not done by some guy in a cave in Afghanistan. I'm sorry. This is done by forces inside of the U.S. military intelligence apparatus with collusion of certain forces in, certain places in the Middle East that are not Arab, and Britain. I would like to have seen more evidence that these things were taken down, that the transhumanist network was kept, like in Donald's first term. I think my hope had a more solid foundation, because I could see not only was there a more aggressive attack by these forces of the British-run deep state to destroy him with Russiagate and everything else, but also he did keep the transhumanist Silicon Valley forces at an arm's distance. He didn't allow Elon to get too close to shape policy. He didn't allow Peter Thiel. He allowed Peter Thiel to give him some money, but he didn't allow him to get so close that he could shape policy, or Larry Ellison or Larry Fink. They were always kept at a distance. So that gave me a sense that there was more of a fight and a recognition of the evil of what this occult transhumanist religion was. And in this second version or iteration, I don't see that happening. I see Stargate, Project Stargate being ushered in to call forth the new age of what Larry Ellison and these transhumanists have wanted with Oracle,
You think?
and Palantir and what have you. Yeah.
Well, I believe it's Sun Tzu, but I think the first time that it got popularized in mainstream is probably The Godfather, which is keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yes.
There is that.
True. There is that. That's a good point. So as long as
I'm not here to say one way or the other.
I concur.
If the thing he learned in the first term was, man, these people can do a lot of damage when they're left to their own devices.
Yeah. So for me, that's going to be the test, right? In the coming months ahead, I'm going to be just watching to see to what degree does he allow power to actualize itself in action that shapes, like that creates policy that will shape our destiny. You know, like this guy, what's his name? Ken Howery. Is he there as a place setter? Is he just simply allowing, this Elon Musk buddy to become the ambassador to Denmark in order to satisfy and to bide some time to those who would like to have.
How much? Once again, I forgive me. Maybe the audience can help me out here. I'm sure they'll text me at some point. The ambassador to Denmark, is that a ceremonial role? Do they just go over there and it's kind of a meaningless role, or is there actual power as an ambassador to Denmark? I actually have no clue.
If it's an ambassador plenipotentiary, I can't pronounce that word, plenipotentiary, then they have signing power. They have authorization to make executive decisions on behalf of their nation. If it's a regular old ambassador, probably not as much authority. It might just very well be, I wouldn't say ceremonial position, but something that still has to be obedient to a national policy from abroad. So, again, we have to see what kind of deals are reached, what type of, policies are signed. Same thing for Tony Blair. Is he just placating some of his psychopathic enemies by giving them a position on the Gaza Board of Peace and the executive board? Or is their ideology going to be presenting itself as sculpting and shaping the behavior of these agencies, right? Am I going to see more BlackRock influence controlling freedom cities and little, micromanaged Rhodesian-like districts under some sort of a blockchain type of system to monitor our every act and what we spend and what have you? Or is it going to be something more human that I can recognize as something I can hold on to and believe? What are the British going to do with Canada? Are they going to permit for the integration of Canada into this broader jurisdiction with a golden dome? That's another thing too I didn't mention, that Trump's part of his Davos speech.
It was the golden dome.
The Golden Dome. Yeah. I'm not a fan of that. I don't think that that's a great idea. I think that, if you really want to have peace in the world, I think you should try to find economic agreements. I don't think that there's any reason the idea that Russia and China, which are being used in the language and the narrative to justify these maneuvers, I don't think that they actually want to militarily invade Europe or destroy the Western order. I don't think they want to take control of Greenland. I think that they do want economic deals to be made that will create more trust between countries to create prosperity and the basis upon which we can have a future. And I think that Trump in his first term was more, at least in his language. Again, I could be wrong, and maybe Alex Craner is right, and he's doing these backdoor deals to build the Bering Strait, to build Arctic development with Russia and with China. Maybe that's true. I hope it is. But right now, if I see golden domes which means massive missile systems built up around the whole technate, pretty much, directed. Who are they going to be directed at? Are they directed at the city of London? No, the missile shield and the space-based weaponry is probably going to be directed at Russia and China primarily, who haven't quite been playing ball with the New World Order as they were expected to a few years back. So that's not constructive in my mind. Canada are the British going to give the command order to Carney to simply go along with and stand down and allow the technique to form? Because if the British go along with that means to me that there's more collusion than I currently want there to be. Or are they going to use Canada for an extended period to try to weaken the Russia-China relationship, which is what I think they're using it for currently, is they really Russia and China have had a bond, the tightest, closest bond of survival with the deepest strategic partnership over the past decade of any two countries in the world. It's Russia and China together that are the bedrock of the BRICS. They're the bedrock of the the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, of all of these, these agencies, these organizations that have been created representing the global South. And the empire has wanted desperately to weaken that bond. Russia has a lot of resources. China has a lot of tech and industrial capacity and an ability to make things happen fast, build big infrastructure. Russia lacks some of that, but they have a big military intelligence capability and a lot of resources. So they have talents that they bring to the table, and they both mutually complement each other quite a bit. So how do you weaken that bond? Well, Canada is one place where Carney can say to China, hey, look, we got a lot of resources. We know we've done you some wrongs. We know you don't trust us. China canceled the Justin Trudeau, or actually it was originally Stephen Harper, and then Justin Trudeau, who were both pushing the special relationship, the Canada-China free trade agreement that was supposed to usher in this new kind of like alliance. And China basically said in 2017, get the hell out. Like, we don't trust you in any way. And Justin Trudeau famously went to Beijing, got off the plane. There was nobody there. It was a big fuck you. Sorry for the language, but it was a big fuck you. And he basically got back on the plane in embarrassment and flew back to Canada as a big failure. And the whole free trade agreement was thrown in the garbage bin. So that was, I think, largely because China started waking up to realizing what an asset of a higher global imperial British complex Canada has always been, and they didn't want to get locked into this resource enmeshment, this honeypot, whereby if they got addicted to resources that was being offered to them, that the taps could at some point be turned off once they were dependent. So I think they chose to go with the more expensive but more reliable partner of Russia for their resources at the time. But now, we have a lot of the supply chains, the resources that China relies on, and both in Venezuela, in African domains that are being targeted for destabilization, in the Middle East being targeted. Iran is targeted for destabilization. I don't think we're out of that storm yet. A lot of those reliable areas that China relies on are not so reliable anymore. Even in their own backyard, Nepal went through a CIA regime change a few months ago. Thailand and Cambodia are being induced to go to war due to, largely U.S. intelligence operators working in both sides to try to create conflict, which is in China's backyard. Japan is calling for, building up a new nuclear weapons program. They also host 56,000 U.S. troops, which is still growing. There's Green Berets being sent to Taiwan that have been there for about 2 years, organizing and training the Taiwanese military to use them the way they've been using Ukrainian military as a proxy for a war with Russia in the case of Ukraine, but also now with Taiwan and Japan as disposable proxies against China. South Korea also hosts 28,000 U.S. troops. It's very aggressive. So Philippines has a U.S. military deal to host 8 military bases in preparation for an oncoming war with China. So China's got a lot of precariousness, and I think with Carney's new language, it's almost like his speech at Davos could have been written by Jeffrey Sachs. And his what he's putting forth is a message to China saying, look, we're being bullied by the big bad American bullies. You are too. They're trying to hurt you just like they're trying to hurt us. We're different now. Let's work together. Give us another chance. I know we arrested your Huawei, CFO and all that stuff, but give us another chance. We're different now. And we're in it together. We'll create the new world order together. And I think that a lot of Canadians are being given a narrative to make it seem as though, hey, look, this is evidence that China's been controlling Canada this whole time. It's actually, this is proof. And in fact, I would say in my analysis that this is actually the British Empire infiltrating China with Trojan Horse Canada to get close to in order to sabotage ultimately China from within, which is what Desmarais was doing back in the 70s already, setting up the Canada-China Business Alliance and things like that to infiltrate and infuse toxic ideas to control
Does anybody
China.
understand why you and Cooper on the stage is going to be fascinating?
Yeah,
I don't know if
probably.
anybody, because, I would say a healthy majority of Canadians are on the side of China bad.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then I sit and I listen and I'm like, you paint China in a different light. I don't know if that's good or bad, Matt. I don't even know. I just enjoy the fact that you think differently than 70 or 80% of Canadians. Maybe more than that. Maybe it's even higher than
Well,
that.
you know what the unfortunate thing is? I think it's 70 or 80% of Albertans and conservative Canadians for sure. What annoys me is that a lot of liberal idiot Canadians kind of agree with a lot of what I'm saying, about China, because they like China for all the wrong reasons. They're like, oh yeah, look, it's such a green place. They're so safe and secure. Like they like China because Carney likes or saying nice things about China. Like the liberals will do whatever the guy wearing the red L it tells them to do. And so if he says now we're gonna like China, I know we didn't like China last year, but now we're gonna like China. It's like the wind. They're like, oh yeah, we always like China. Yeah, okay, yeah, it's Morton's. So that's annoying to me. And for me, it's like I think a bad defense is worse than like a direct offense. Like if somebody's like directly attacking my position, it's better than if they're defending it poorly. And the worst thing for conservatives to hear, who were like very aware of like global nefarious conspiracies, is to hear a liberal trying to defend China, and it's like, no, you're doing a terrible job. You're making China seem terrible. Like, it's anyway. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm looking forward to this debating experience. We'll see how it goes. I mean, Sam Cooper's he produces a lot of stuff, and a lot of it has a lot of useful material inside of it. I just find that, I mean, I guess it'll come up in the show, is I just find that at the end, there's always like, and the source for this ultimate conclusion of who's running this thing I've just exposed is this anonymous source from CSIS or the RCMP, who's given me something, internal intelligence that it's like, well, why am I believing that CSIS is this patriotic agency, or the RCMP is this patriotic agency that is disseminating the truth about how to interpret all of these nefarious, laundering operations and drug operations and casino operations that are being done by triads? But why am I going to believe they're not, like, these guys actually care about the truth and aren't giving me just like spin to deflect attention away from Satanists that have been running my society? So that's one of the annoying things, I guess, so far. But I'm going to keep on reading his stuff, and I got his book, so I'm going to try to have some useful things to say. We'll see how it goes.
Well, I tell you what, I'm just happy that it's going to happen, right? I mean, good, bad, and different. I'm like, at least Shaun can take this idea and say we did it.
Yes.
And then carry on, because like, one of the reasons, Matt, and I assume the audience knows this, they like you for a lot of different reasons. I like what you do because you bring in a lot of historical context that I go back, I go back to the Alaska thing and Russia selling it. I was like, what? And then I was like, I always tell myself and the audience, like, don't believe everything everyone tells you. Like, go take a look into it. Go do. And so that sent me on a deep dive into Russia-U.S. relations. And I was like, how you get taught certain things? You just showed like how many different maps of War Red, I think it was, and War Orange, correct?
War Plan Red and War Plan Orange, yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think I ever got shown any of that in school, ever. Full stop. I'm like, that's interesting to me, right? Like, it's omittance of information. Right? Mm-hmm. You're not pulling out the full story. Well, why would you do that? Was it not important? Maybe it wasn't important. Yeah. I don't know. Like, but at the same time, the U.S., if I understood all the maps correctly, had intelligence that was stating there was the opportunity or the chance that the British had put out earlier, correct? The British put out a plan of like basically invasion of the United States from all sides, from a whole bunch of different countries, including Mexico, Japan, and Canada. I think I saw that correctly, right?
Yeah, well, that was combined with the German plans too. So, but you had both of those plans combined together. But the British were going to do an all-out assault on the United States, specifically with Japan was the big one. So just Britain and Japan was part of their attack procedure.
And I know you got to walk through and game plan a whole bunch. It's just interesting to me. Now, in fairness, how do you cover that in a social studies class back in the day, right? Like, I'm sure you're trying to hit the highlights, maybe. But in all the history classes I've gone through, and I'd like to think that's more than most, I don't think I ever remember. And if I did, or if I was sitting in the class, it went completely over my head, or we didn't focus in on it.
No, I think too, it was kind of like a piece of trivia that I remember a history teacher just kind of throwing out sardonically to try to just demonstrate, he's typical leftist, anti-American imperialist teacher, he just threw out the war plan red. And I remember it kind of like just being an interesting thing that was a factoid that kind of bounced in and out of the discussion, and that was it. But I think, the way that they teach, the way that history has been taught is so duplicitous, and it's designed to be duplicitous to only focus fallaciously on list what happened, put a date on what happened, memorize it. But when it comes to intentions, conspiracies, ideas that are immaterial but that shape the material world, those are, you can't know. You can't know causation. You can't know causality. You can't know what, and looking sometimes at what didn't happen gives you more of an insight into why things happened the way they did and not some other way, right? Like by looking at the planned scenarios of the military British invasion of Canada, of the USA, and of the US counter response shows you a lot more about the real battle of ideas that was shaping the decisions that actually became material reality, and gives us a better sense of the battle lines that are currently being, that JFK was operating within, that FDR and our current world is being shaped by. And we learn so much more by looking at sometimes what didn't happen, but could have, or even, I alluded to FDR. I just said he stopped the New World Order from happening like 3 times in the course of his 12 years in office. It didn't happen. So current history teaching would say, well, then there's no point learning about it if it didn't happen. I'm like, well, no, it didn't happen because there was a fight to stop it from happening. Like the Wall Street banks were broken up through a fight that otherwise would have had them in a position to usher in a hellish fascist new age, where they were already funding a Nazi, a military dictatorship in America with Smedley Butler, who blew the whistle, and people could watch the videos on YouTube of Smedley Butler exposing to the American people on film how he was being commissioned by the JP Morgan bankers who were funding fascism to storm the White House and install him as a puppet dictator. And he talks like that. He's exposing that to empower all of us for all time. It didn't happen. So I guess that's why it's not in my history books.
Well, and I you'll probably be able to phrase this better, but to me, these ideas are formed. You have this war of ideas, and then what we say play out is how they enact themselves on the world.
Yes.
And so in the retelling of history, there are some really bad ideas. There's some really good ideas. Mm-hmm. But what gets talked about a lot is what won out in society, essentially, right? Because what you're playing out the picture of is, and a lot of it's been forgotten. I was Iran. One of the things I got sent to me, an old documentary of I believe, forgive me, I think it was the Shah being deposed or removed or whatever the word is, and how like it was within the decade before that happened, he was having parades in New York City. And I'm like, of Iran? Like, what? Like, where is that in the history books? Why is it that we're framing Iran as this big, awful entity? That's probably the best way. You don't think of the people. Don't think it's all these bad ideas. Let's talk about the ideas. I'm sure there are some bad ones. Sure, there's a lot. But it's within the last 50 roughly years, they were here. And we were giving them parades in New York City.
Yes.
What? How have they become our one of the sought after enemies of the world? Iran is in the middle of the you talk about China and Russia, but I would say Iran is awfully close to the third, isn't it? On
the target list, yeah.
And if you go back in history, you find, wait a second, we were friends with Iran, we were friends with Russia. I'm sure I can pull up stuff and I'm sure you can too, that shows we were friends with China. Wasn't it the World War II? Am I remembering this wrong, Matt? In popular movie culture, if Americans were bombed down fighting Japan, they were told to go to China. Am I wrong in remembering that?
No, and the Chinese saved thousands of American soldiers who were bombed down. They at great risk of their own life. And the Chinese, during World War II, and the Japanese, it began a lot earlier for the Chinese. The Japanese invaded them in like 1931, so they had already been fighting for a long time. They lost something like 12 million people in the Japanese Wall Street London funded Japanese fascist program to enslave the under races, the inferior races of the Han, because they had this whole kind of like the Germans had their own Teutonic Aryan mythos that justified why they're the superior beings endowed to be the masters over the Untermensch, which was the Slavs and the inferior, the Gypsies and all that stuff. So too did the Japanese have their own mythos that was completely scientifically unjustified, but that in their minds justified the expansion of, eugenics programs, sterilization of the unfit, kind of like what Canada was doing to the Inuits, and Greenland and Denmark was doing to the Greenland Inuits in the 60s and 70s. So they were doing that on a much bigger scale, of course. And yeah, we thought of the Chinese as being like our allies in the battle against this evil, and we thought of the Russians as being our allies against this evil that people had a better grasp of back then than we do today. And I think the Cold War screwed up a lot of people's heads. That's decades of CIA Mockingbird media hysterics that were fed
reinforcing this fear of the end of the world.
Yeah, doing like duck and cover operations with poor baby boomer kids who don't know what's going on in school, being told you're going to die every single day. It could be your last day of nuclear war, and you're watching your leaders, Martin Luther King, getting cut down in public, and JFK and other things, and seeing the Vietnam War just grow and unnecessary war. Like that screws up the heads. And then you got drugs. Somehow drugs are just everywhere in campuses in the 60s and 70s. You're not asking questions. You're just like, the world's crazy, but at least there's this. So people are just getting more dislodged from their ability to just think rationally about what's happening to them. And this is what the whole generation of Western baby boomers were subjected to. So you can't blame them. But then again, you look at like China, like one of the greatest heroes in China. Yeah, they like Mao to a certain degree, but they also like Sun Yat-sen. Like, they like Sun Yat-sen, who has statues all over China. In Nanjing, there's like Sun Yat-sen Park, and his home is like a sanctuary. Sun Yat-sen is an Abraham Lincoln Christian who was the first president of China, who overthrew the Qing dynasty in 1911 and modeled his whole program on Abraham Lincoln's American system that he enshrined in his three principles of the people that anyone can read, in his program for the international development of China that goes on to inform what
I knew I was recognizing that name. Now, this is the wrong one, folks, but it's the first one where you talk about that. And I was like, what?
Yeah,
like,
the founding father of the Republic of China is like a Christian Confucian scholar and doctor and Lincoln follower who was trained in Hawaii. Like what a paradigm shifter that blew my mind when I first encountered that years ago. But again, he's like praised in both Taiwan as a great hero, but also in China as a great hero. Like he's a beloved. They have national holidays celebrating this guy, so it's not like the rifts ideologically and spiritually are not as deep as we're told they are between these irreconcilable, the East is East, the West is West, and never the twain shall meet garbage. Like there are common moral principles that have shaped and helped us fight evil at different times that are the same, principles.
I think that's a beautiful spot to end it.
Okay.
Matt, appreciate you hopping on and doing this. And we're going to see you here March 28th. In Calgary, alongside a whole cast of characters, and looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing you again. Thanks again for hopping on and doing this.
Of course. All right.